physical therapy doesn't work. So what's pretty cool actually is that a lot of people DM'd me and sent me messages about my little short video talking about physical therapy and the problem with physical therapy. And I appreciate that. I got a lot of feedback, especially from physical therapists. And as I said, I am not criticizing physical therapists. But the thing is, and that what inspired me to even comment on it, is that I hear athletes come to me and tell me, well, physical therapy doesn't work. And, well, that's simply not true. So physical therapy works. It's like, I don't even know why. Well, whatever. Anyways, people feel like it doesn't work, though, because why? Because we got injured again. You know, you got injured. So you get injured and you get your surgery and you go through physical therapy and then you go back to playing your sport and you get the exact same injury all over again. And then you decide to yourself, well, physical therapy didn't work. Well, stop and think about it. You got injured playing the sport. Okay, that sucks. Now you go through the whole rehab process. You go back to the very same thing that injured you, but have you actually changed anything to prevent yourself from getting injured again? You're recovered, yes. Whether it was a ACL or MCL, meniscus, you could have a Bankart lesion in your shoulder, whatever it is, right? And you go right back to doing the same thing that got you injured in the first place. But did you change anything about how you move? Did you change your mechanics? Did you address the issue that caused you to get injured in the first place? It's great that you went to physical therapy and that you recovered and now you have use of this limb again. But, gosh, if you got injured because of bad mechanics and then you didn't fix the mechanics, you're probably going to get injured again. Now, the easiest example I can give for this is the fact that I struggled with stress fractures and shin splints constantly. So I've talked about this in the past. I'm dumb. I'm very, very stupid. And, well, we all are at, 18, 19 years of age. That's life. If you're not dumb at 18, and let me put it to you this way. If by the age of 38 you don't look back and say, wow, I was really dumb 20 years ago, I feel bad for you, because you probably should have made some progress in that 20 years and recognized, ooh, some of that stuff I did 20 years ago wasn't very good. For most of us, we look back and we say, 20 years ago, I didn't know shit. But maybe it's different for you. For me, I look back and I say, wow, that whole thing of just run more, it worked. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it didn't work. It worked. I just ran more and ran more and ran more and ran more. And yes, if you keep hammering volume and practicing and training very hard, you will make progress. Is it the best way to make progress? Probably not. It's kind of like this whole thing that like everything works, but some things work better. So I kept getting shin splints, and then I would run even with shin splints because I didn't care. It was like I need to get my miles in. And then I would run till I got a stress fracture, and I would do stupid things at that point, like trying to tape my shins. And eventually I would reach a point where it's so bad I have to go see a doctor. The doctor would look at my x-ray and tell me, dude, how long you been running on this? And I'm like, it just started hurting, which is a lie. And he'd be like, this didn't just start hurting, man. Like, this is a really bad stress fracture. Like, this is not something that just recently started hurting. And I'm like, well, it was kind of a little bit sore. It's not like it had no pain. It just kind of hurt a little bit. And it just got worse. And the doctor would tell me, yeah, all right, well, you're going to spend, the next 4 weeks in a boot. Or whatever it is, whatever he told me. So I had to take 4 weeks off, and then, of course, what I do, but went right back to running, and I'm ramping up my miles and ramping up my miles and ramping up my miles. And sure enough, I would do the same thing over and over and over again. Eventually, I got tired of this shit. And so I started learning, because that's what you have to do at some point. You have to learn. And so I'm going to make a weird statement here, but you need to regress in order to make progress. And so I had to go backwards, and I had to start small, and I had to change my running mechanics. And one of the best things I did actually was, oddly enough, I got in touch with Brian McKenzie, who was putting on these clinics for CrossFit where they were teaching running. And he was teaching something called pose running. I had never heard of this thing before. And I was like, what the hell is pose running? Well, after taking a 2-day course, it's not like I knew how to do this, but I knew what it was now. And so I dove really deep into all the different stuff on, like, I think there's also something called chi running, which is basically very similar, pose running. I got all these books and I watched videos and I dug into this stuff and I figured out, oh shit, all this really hard heel striking stuff is not good for me because I overpronate. I overpronate a lot. And so I went to this running store that doesn't even exist anymore, and they had me run on a treadmill and actually like had a camera that watched how my foot strike went, and you could see every time my foot would strike, my foot would go inward, which means that my navicular bone is dropping and I'm flattening out my foot. I'm overpronating way into the inside, and that of course was driving all this force up into my tibia. So what did I do? I had to take time to practice this pose running technique, and I had to correct my biomechanics so that I would run properly. Now, I used to think there was this magical barrier. Every time I got to 60 miles a week, I would start getting shin splints and stress fractures. I couldn't seem to get past that. It was like 60 miles was this magical barrier that I just got stuck at every time. After addressing my mechanics and fixing my overpronation, I was running 100 to 120 miles a week injury-free. Why not 150 miles a week? Because I didn't have time. I ran as much as I could with the time that I had, and that meant that some weeks I'd run 100 and some weeks I might get as much as 120 in. Okay? And that wasn't because that was all the more volume I could handle. That was because that was all the more time I had. Because believe me, if I had more time, I would have run even more. Because that's who I am and that's how I am. I would do even more. So, the important part to this, though, is that I was running up to 120 miles in a week and not suffering any pain or injuries. So, how can we apply this to other situations? Well, let's say, for instance, that you do have navicular drop, your foot caves in, and that's the mechanism by which you suffered an ACL tear because your knee twists. And I think you only have something, don't quote me on this, but I think the number is like 15 degrees. If your knee twists by 15 degrees, it'll tear the ACL. I believe that's what I've read in the literature. And I don't know if it's the same for everyone. I would imagine some people tear before that because we're all slightly different. So you might have a little softer of a tendon, if that makes sense. Softer ligaments, softer meniscus, etc. And maybe you have a little extra mobility. And someone else might not have that extra mobility. Maybe they tear at 12%, or 12 degrees, I guess. So, if you internally or externally rotate your knee, and that tibia and, the lining, like where it lines up with your femur comes down, you got all this connective tissue between the two, right? If you twist that, you're going to tear something. But some of us might have a little more wiggle room than others. In any case, 15 degrees is where you have this injury, right? Okay, so you get injured, and then you rehab it, and then you go right back to doing the same thing you were doing before, but you haven't addressed the fact that your foot collapses whenever you go to change directions, and so now you just get re-injured. Okay, what if after doing your physical therapy, you spent 6 to 8 weeks doing some type of return to play program where you were correcting your mechanics? Now you correct that, and your foot no longer collapses when you land or no longer collapses when you change directions, and you won't re-injure that ACL. Okay? Some movements are just bad movements. I am not a fan of the kipping pull-up. I've seen so many people have slap tears from it, and don't get me wrong, some people are built well, they can do them forever. I don't have a problem with kipping pull-ups myself, but I also didn't have a problem when I did gymnastics, so I could be swinging around the high bar and do all kinds of crazy shit, doing the rings even. I didn't have shoulder issues, but I have hypermobile shoulders. Like my shoulders, it's the reason why I suck at the jerk. So when I do a clean and jerk, the reason why I suck at the jerk is because I have super hypermobile shoulders. Hypermobile shoulders are not great for lifting heavy weights. In fact, actually, just hypermobile joints in general are not great for lifting heavy weights. But they're great for gymnastics. So, maybe you need to pick your sport wisely. I'm too tall for gymnastics, and I'm too weak for weightlifting. I'm the perfect balance of average. Anyways, so certain movements, maybe you should just avoid them. Some people just don't have good hips for squatting deep, so maybe don't take up weightlifting. Like, you're not going to catch a snatch, with your butt touching the back of your ankles because your hip sits maybe slightly forward, and so now you have this impingement. Okay, someone else has hips that sit backwards. They have more open of a hip. They can catch that snatch where their butt lands on the back of their shoe. It's just like we're all slightly different in our bone structures. Anyways, moving forward from this, the point that I'm trying to make here is that when athletes come to me and they complain that physical therapy didn't work or physical therapy doesn't work, I want you to stop and look at yourself and say, what am I doing? And I'm not pushing some kind of weird extreme ownership. It's entirely possible that you had a bad physical therapist. I mean, that's something that exists everywhere. There are bad doctors, there are good doctors. There are bad therapists, there are good therapists. There are bad coaches. Lots of bad coaches. And there are good coaches. But what I would say is that before you just double down and be like, all therapists suck. Well, if you've seen multiple different therapists, the odds of you seeing 100% bad therapists are probably not very likely. And so at some point you have to stop and ask yourself, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing that's causing me to get injured? And that's maybe the moment where you need to regress and, take a step back, figure out what's wrong with your mechanics. Why did you get injured in the first place? And why do you keep getting re-injured? Address that, and then you can make progress because you've addressed that underlying issue. You've addressed the mechanics. And that's really all I was trying to tell people. I'm trying to tell people that it's not that physical therapy doesn't work. It's that you're an athlete and you're in a rush to get back to your sport. And I understand that because that's how I feel too. How many times did I do stupid things in hockey where I should have taken more time off and I didn't because I got to get back on the ice. I got to get back in the game. I can't take time off. I think I've told the story once before, and I probably shouldn't share this story because I don't want to give anyone ideas, but I got injured, and I broke my hand and my wrist, which sucked. I got slashed really, really hard on a face-off. I played center, and I got slashed like you wouldn't believe. This dude cracked me. He did it on purpose, too. So this wasn't even an accidental thing. He definitely, yeah, he won that little exchange. So in any case, I end up in a cast. And I'm like, shit. I can't play with a cast on. Well, the team doctor was like, it's just a fracture. I was like, yeah, it is just a fracture. He's like, I'll help you cut the cast off. And so the team doctor helped me cut the cast off. It's not the way things are supposed to be, but his job is to get me back in the game. His job is not to be, this team doctor who says, oh no, you should take 6 weeks off. No, his job is to get you back in the game. And so he helped me cut the cast off. We taped my hand up, and I played. Okay? Stupid. Yes. But I was also 17. So when you're 17, you're invincible. And you do stupid things. And I thought this was the greatest thing in the whole world that he was going to help me cut this cast off. So, that's a prime example of being in too much of a rush to get back into the game. Now, thankfully, I didn't re-fracture my hand or suffer any further injury, but that was dumb. That could have ended badly. I could have done something where I re-fractured it, and maybe the next time I re-fractured it, it could have been a compound fracture, or it could have been a non-union fracture or something terrible. It wasn't. I thankfully did not get re-injured. But that was dumb. And so my point to you, okay, is that maybe sometimes in our rush to get back into the game, we actually screw ourselves and end up getting re-injured. My shin splint story is probably a better example of that. I kept going right back into running as fast as I could. As soon as the pain was gone, it was like, oh, I'm taking this boot off, I'm going for a run. And it's like, you didn't take enough time to let it heal, but then you're going to be upset when it gets injured again. And so my advice to people, like I said, I'm not criticizing the therapist here. That's not the problem. The problem is us, myself included. We athletes love our sport. We want to get back to doing it. And so the idea of taking time off sucks. Just sucks. But I'm telling you, it's probably the best thing for you. So instead of taking just 4 weeks off, take the 8 weeks off. In the long scheme of things, when you look back in 20 years, that extra 4 weeks, it's not going to make a big difference. It made a big difference to you in the short term. But in the long term, that extra 4 weeks is the reason why you didn't get re-injured. Because you spent 4 extra weeks doing return to play, fixing your biomechanics, fixing the reason why you got injured in the first place. And so my advice to people is to regress in order to make progress. So take a step back, address whatever movement issue you have, address your form, address your technique, address your mechanics, address your muscle imbalances, whatever it is, and then move forward from there. And that really is what we should be doing. And it sounds like common sense. It sounds obvious. I actually feel stupid saying this out loud. And yet I'm sure if you're a coach, and I assume that there are people out there who are coaches that listen to me, you've seen it. And if you're an athlete, you've done it. So we're all guilty of it. I'm not throwing stones. I live in a glass house myself. These are stupid things that I did myself. I share this story because I'm trying to spare other people from making the same mistake that I made. So learn from my mistake rather than making that mistake yourself. And of course, if I was 17 and I was listening to this, I would be like, fuck this dude. He has no idea what he's talking about. I need to be back in the game. And so I am even aware of the fact that I would not listen to my own advice. If 38-year-old Chad went back and talked to 18-year-old Chad and told him, yo, dude, take an extra couple weeks off, 18-year-old Chad would tell that 38-year-old Chad to fuck off, dude. You don't know. I can run through anything. And so I wouldn't even listen to this advice. But I'm going to put it out there anyways on the rare chance that maybe there's an 18-year-old out there listening to me with the maturity to actually listen to this and think, oh yeah, I don't want to make that same mistake. And so, like I say all the time, if it helps just one person, it's good enough for me. If you guys like the video, like the video. If you guys have opinions on this, maybe you've made the same mistake, maybe you have a good story to share, maybe you have a good example, I'd love to hear it. Go ahead and put it in the comments below. If you have questions, comment below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys like this kind of content. We can talk about injuries a lot. I got a ton of stories of working with different athletes. I've had athletes with oblique tears and meniscus, Bankart lesions, you name it, I've seen it. It's just part of sport. I've seen all kinds of weird shit. I've seen shattered femurs, and I've seen broken patellas. Yeah, that is sport. Sport is chaos, and people get injured. And then we got to try to figure out a way to make sure they don't get injured a second time. So, I pick up where everything else leaves off. Once the surgeon and the physical therapist clear you, I try to get people back to the level they need to be at in order to play their sport, rather than just putting them back in. And that's something I really hope other coaches care about too. And so hopefully this message reaches people, and other coaches say, yes, I want to make sure my athletes don't get injured a second time. But, sometimes money's on the line, and we put people back in the game anyways, especially at the pro level. People are going to go back in because they're getting paid to play. That's the name of the game. So, hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope it helps even just one person. Thanks for your time.